there. Welcome to Picayune Conversations. I don't know what episode number this is, but it's some
5,000.
episode. It's not our first episode. That's the most I could really tell you. We're going to talk a little bit today about early recollections, and which, of course, recollection, we just mean memories. We mean early memories of life. And this is just something that we do. So we're Adlerian. We work from an Adlerian model. And when we say Adlerian, that's referencing Alfred Adler, who was a 20th century psychiatrist, early psychological theorist, psychotherapist. And so we have trained with other Adlerians who have taught us how to do a whole bunch of things, one of which is to work with early recollections. And we want to just talk a little bit about, I guess, some understandings of what we are doing and what we are not doing when we ask about early memories. And then we wanted to share one with you, not one of ours, but...
Which we could do that at another
time. Yeah, we could do that at some other time.
And do it in depth, because...
Yeah,
especially for students, I found that they've been reaching out and they have some questions, which I wrote down somewhere, but they're not with me right now, so that's not helpful.
We'll come back to them. So we're going to talk a little bit maybe about like the theory, just to really clarify what we're doing and what we're not doing, and then we'll give you an example, and we'll talk about kind of some implications of that. It could be a wonderful conversation, could be a little pointless, but I guess we'll find out. I don't think it's going to be pointless.
I don't think it'll be pointless. If anything, it'll be amusing.
So straight away, I want us to talk, I want to pick your brain a little bit on, I think something that it's a little tempting to do when we talk about memories is to get really focused on what happened, like historically, objectively, and I don't know if you could talk a little bit about memory related to objectivity or anything like that.
Well, not just that, but I feel like people get bogged down in the like Freudian, no offense, like the symbolism in there, and that's not it either. And I think that you described it the best. This was like 5 years ago. A way that Paul Rasmussen described cognitive processing is that every time you remember a memory, you're actually recalling the last time that you remembered it. So it's like this game of memory telephone, which is precisely why we ask, because as you remember it now you're remembering it as you are now. You're projecting yourself now onto your past. So it gives us, even if it's made up, like with little kids, when I used to see kids, they're literally still in the early recollection forming stage. I'd have them make it up. And sometimes they would give me a real one and it's made up. I can give that example later. It's actually really sweet and short. Because that was actually one of the questions that the students asked, which was like, what if somebody doesn't have one? I have them make it up. Because all in all, what it does is it gives us good information, make sure I get this right, of how they see themselves, others, and the world. Like, what does life mean to me? But it does a bunch of other things therapeutically, too. Like, it builds therapeutic alliance, it helps with treatment planning.
Yeah.
Because you know where to go and what kinds of skills to teach. I'm trying to think what else we use it for.
Well, I think you're doing a really good job of just pointing out that when we ask about early memories, we are not so.
We don't care about the facts.
I really, and I'll tell clients this when I ask them for an early memory, I'll say, right off the bat, I want you to know I'm utterly disinterested in whether or not what you're about to tell me is historically or factually true. I only care that you remember it.
And it doesn't matter if it's implanted.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Like I have one that it feels like a memory of mine, but I know it's something that my Aunt Stephanie has told me and told the family over and over again, and it feels like my memory. But because I remember it the way that I do, it tells a lot about who I think I am and what I do with the world. I also, this is kind of a fun thing, so maybe we could incorporate this somehow, but I sometimes use early recollections as ways to measure progress, because if you tell the story at the beginning of therapy, and then when we're kind of wrapping up, I'll have them retell the same story. And then the questions that we ask at the end, the answers to the questions change, and you can see the meaning has changed. So right then and there, it shows you.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Arthur Clarke, who in the Adlerian world, he's so you could make the case that he's like the guru of early recollection work. Has done an incredible amount of research, a lot of really cool articles by Dr. Clarke. Who we've met and is he probably wouldn't remember us, but we remember him. He's a nice guy. I hope maybe we can see him again in June at a conference. But he's done a lot of work looking at early recollections and seeing that that if you ask a client at the beginning of treatment to share their earliest recollection, and then ask them at the end of treatment, things have really substantially changed. And he's got like cool empirical research that's all behind that. So that's all just to say, like, these are not reliable. Like, our memory is horrendously unreliable, and that doesn't mean that it's not useful. It says, as you're pointing out, like, it says a lot about who we are in the present, not so much about what happened back then. Of course, it's, probably at least loosely connected to something that happened back then, but it says a lot more about who we are in the present.
And that's like the cool part, is like we can't always control the things that happen, especially the not so good stuff, but over time we get to decide the meaning that we make of it, and we continue to make different meanings. Like, maybe you make a really unpleasant meaning from a trauma or a bad experience, but like then in therapy you can make a different meaning, and that is what you have control over, and it's really empowering.
Yeah.
At least it has been.
Yeah.
So.
You also mentioned just that there's a tendency to really focus on like content or obsess over symbol. Like, I remember doing this early recollection demonstration in an undergraduate course, and I asked for a volunteer to share an early recollection, and there was some like clown doll that showed up.
Yeah. Were they wearing a green shirt or a red shirt? I don't know.
Yeah. And I told the students, I said, now the really tempting thing at the end of this recollection is to say, well, what does the clown mean? And I don't know, I'm open to the idea that it's not that I'm like opposed to the ideas of symbolism or something like that in dreams or in early recollections. I'm not opposed to that idea, but I also know that sometimes they can be like kind of like little sideshows, that you kind of obsess over, what does this symbolize, and really like miss the forest for the trees. And so, when I work with early recollections, I'm not so much focused on like, let's dissect every little thing that happens in here and figure out what it means and like the deep, dark trauma that's behind that. Sometimes maybe that's there. But really what I'm trying to do is to say, how is it that this person sees the world, and how do they make their way through it? How do they make life go well for them? How do they keep it from going terribly? And I'm looking at those things not specifically related to content, but more like, if I strip all the content specific stuff out, what's the story here? So we can give an example of that in a second, but I think these are the things that if you're interested in maybe you are a therapist and you're interested in Adlerian theory, or you're a prospective client and you're wondering about like how do therapists, and maybe particularly Adlerian therapists, how they work with early memories. I think the things we would want you to know is it's not so objective, and I mean that in a good sense. I don't mean that in like a wishy-washy sense of like, everything depends. I just mean that we're not so focused on content, we're not so focused on symbols, we're not so focused on the historical facts of what happened. Those things may be important in their own right, but we're really just looking for like a big picture approach to perceiving and acting in the world.
It's like, what are the challenges? How did they overcome them?
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Yeah.
How are they seeing the world? And I think the example we'll use, there's a lot of...
Yeah, so a good friend of ours who's a professor down at Lynn University, John Sperry,
Thanks,
who
John.
we love. We love John. We're huge John fans. He provided us with an early recollection from a famous person, and we thought we would share it with you and make some observations. Of course, we're not here to like psychoanalyze so much this individual, but just I think we want to just interact with the memory in order to show you how we, where is our brain going? How are we thinking about these kinds of things? So go ahead and share.
Okay. I'm going to try and read slowly. I know that I talk fast. One of my earliest memories is sitting on my grandfather's shoulders, waving a flag as astronauts splash down in Hawaii. For me, the space program has always captured an essential part of what it means to be an American, reaching for new heights, stretching beyond what previously seemed possible.
There's a lot in there, right? And again, we could focus in on like, well, what do the astronauts symbolize? But really, in some ways, this individual, they're kind of telling us what it means. And I think that maybe is a really important thing to start with, is that it's like, when I work with early recollections as a therapist, I'm not particularly focused on figuring out, okay, this is exactly, I will decide what the early recollection means. I'm sure I might have some suggestions, but really what's important about the memory is not what I decided about it as therapist, but what the client has decided about it, how they've given meaning to it, so on and so forth. So can you read that last portion again about the space program, and then he says what it means.
For me, the space program has always captured an essential part of what it means to be an American, reaching for new heights, stretching beyond what previously seemed possible.
Yeah, so I mean that right. It's not like, oh my gosh, how scary they splashed. Are they going to be okay? Like that would have been a perfectly understandable way for a child to, perceive or understand. But for this individual,
he was up on his shoulders and he's waving a flag, sort of in celebration, right?
Yeah,
it's usually why you wave a flag.
And patriotically.
And patriotically, yes. Sorry, spam caller.
Gosh, this is why you don't read things like this off your phone.
Trying to buy my house for $20,000. Something that I noticed, it just flitted out of my brain, but it was about, because I'm always thinking, like, are they thinking and acting cooperatively or competitively? And he's up high, right? And he's thinking about what it means to be an American, meaning like he feels this sense of belongingness and that they're always striving for more. Even though he's up high, he's being supported, right? He's being supported
by an ancestor.
By an ancestor, and watching things come down, and that, I don't know, it's connective. There's everything's all connected, and that you can always have more. And he celebrates it.
So, and if I were earlier I mentioned like stripping a memory of its content-specific elements. So if I were to retell this story, it might be something like this. I'm being supported by the people who have come before me. I see proof that something that it would have been difficult to imagine that would have been possible. I see proof that it is possible, and I feel a sense of hopefulness and expansive possibility. Now, do you see?
And he's not scared of it. He's not scared of things that are beyond him.
Yeah, it's not particularly frightening. So, and you'll see. So I just told it's the same story, but there's no astronauts. There's no Hawaii. There's no big splash. There's no flag. I even took out the grandfather specific information, but you see, it tells the same story. Now, the idea of what we would do with this therapeutically is that we believe that these early memories, and particularly how we're remembering them in the present, they say something about the way that we perceive and move our way through the world in the present moment as well. And so this is an individual, we would make a guess, we would not keep a pet theory, and we have a whole other video on pet theories that we'll show at some point, but we don't have a pet theory of like, oh, I know exactly what this means. Right. But we would probably have a guess that, okay, here's an individual who probably has a strong sense of connection to history, to like what's come before.
And honors it.
And has a feeling of honor. Like it's a positive relationship between them and what's come before. And there also is a real sense of, you think that this is impossible, and I'm not so sure about that. I think maybe we can do that. So you should tell everybody who it is.
It's Barack Obama.
Yeah, who, and what was the title of that book that he published? The Audacity of Hope. The Audacity of Hope. And I mean, this memory, if we were to give this memory a title, which that's something that Harold Mozak, since he's not with us anymore, but Dr. Mozak used to do this thing where he would have people create a headline for an early recollection. This maybe we would title it The Audacity of Hope. Yeah. And of course, by the way, we're not making some like this is not like, we're not like out here campaigning for a candidate or something. It's just, we're just looking at as more like a character study. It's really quite striking that, and I've listened to some interviews with Barack Obama that actually like after his presidency is over. So it's not like some campaign interview where of course he has to say certain things. This is long after that's over. And he is just this like fiercely optimistic person who just continually has this sense of like, I mean that sounds really hard and complicated, but like, I mean we can figure that out. And we can
figure it out together. It's
a real sense of togetherness in that, and not so much like, well, I'm going to figure it out, but oh my gosh, aren't we?
Look what we can do.
Aren't we incredible what we're able to accomplish? So that's now to be fair, right? Like Obama, I mean, he's a very public figure, and so we know what his like actual book is titled, and we can listen to interviews with them that have been listened to I don't know how many millions of, tens of millions of times. So like, we're not privy to this kind of information all the time with clients, but what we are trying to demonstrate is just that there is this really cool, powerful thing that we can, that there are these things that we can glean from a memory. And who knows, Barack Obama's grandfather might say like, I don't think I ever had him on my shoulders. I have a back issue. I couldn't possibly have had him on my shoulders. And it truly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in terms of our willingness to, and our desire to understand, and not just understand what happened back then, but what's happening in the present, what's happening in the here and now.
Yeah. I can share the little one from the little kid in case anybody has kiddos that tell stories.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It'll be quick. So I think he was 3 or 4, and I asked him to give me a memory, and he didn't have one, obviously, because he's still making them. So I asked him to make one up. And the story he proceeds to tell me was about the day that his sister was born. Tells me all about it. It was very detailed. Long story short, he was second born, so there's no way he was at his sister's birth. But what I gleaned from that was that he cannot imagine his life without his sister.
Oh.
It was like the way that he helped her, and even as a baby she was helping him, and they were cooperating, and he was able to help her in ways that I guess she has helped him. Like, he's 3 and I was able to figure that out, and it was beautiful and totally made up because he wasn't alive yet.
Well, it really, narrative therapy, which is, it's like a whole approach. This is basically, their approach is like the stories that we tell ourselves say a lot about how we perceive and interact in the world. And so like, when we make up a story, it's, and I'm going to use a Freudian word here, but that is us taking the things that are inside of our mind and projecting them out onto the external world. And so that's just immensely useful information that we can use therapeutically to identify strengths and liabilities. Our friend and colleague Paul Rasmussen, his approach really focuses on fears and desires. It's like, what do I want to go toward? What do I want to avoid?
Are you serving others? Are you serving yourself?
Yeah, and a whole wide range of approaches to these things. Our friend Gary Ballman, who's a wonderful, wonderful therapist in North Georgia, he has like a whole method of looking at these. So we want to be clear. This, like what we're showing you, this is we're not claiming some monopoly on like this is the only way, but there are some theoretical elements that would bind all these folks' approaches together, and that is that it's less important what happened and more important what we made of it, more important how we kind of inhabit the memory. That, for example, Obama is inhabiting the memory as hopeful, cheerful, celebratory, as opposed to, oh my gosh, this is terrifying. Are they all dead? Boy, they hit the water really fast, really hard. Which again would be a perfectly understandable way for a child to experience something like that. But he experienced it this other way, and that says something about him. So, anyways, more that we could say about this, and maybe we will do some follow up where maybe we could share one of ours or something like that. We can explore that further, but. We just wanted to give you maybe a little bit of a primer and have you be able to interact a little bit with this idea of early recollection. So thank you very much for listening, and tune in next week. We'll have something else to share with you. Thanks. Bye.